Hello, Zambia team. There's just a couple of more issues, a couple of little things to address in your PACE pre-fill document before progressing with the workshop. So I'll just go through them now, and then you can address them and hopefully send them back by end of day today um, to be ready for the workshop tomorrow. So just moving through here, S module looks great, S minus as well. There were a couple of little things here, just in this box here. It says in the explanatory notes here that the dollar kwacha rate is 25.8 kwacha to every US dollar. This sort of implies that the values that you've been putting in here are in kwacha and not in the US dollar. Moving back to module S minus here, it gives you the opportunity to choose a currency other than US dollars. And I just want to make sure that you have put in values in US dollars. This would throw out the tool a little bit if it was incorrect. So just want to make sure on that one. If you haven't put them in, kwacha and they are in US dollars, then that's all good. We can leave that. Moving on, this module here is good. There's a couple of little things in the P minus module still. So the first one I want to touch on is just this production constraint number 8 here. We're looking at suboptimal disease control, pest and weed disease. The short name you've given it is poor disease control, that's fine. But the definition actually doesn't match up with this category, subcategory, and short name. The definition you've put is soil acidity is caused by extensive use of inorganic fertilizers and the neglect of organic matter enriching practices such as crop residue retention. So if you can either choose a different definition here or fix the categories to better reflect the definition, that would be much better. Just looking at these definitions here, that's good. Yeah, so there's nothing here currently capturing disease, so it might be a good idea to just change this definition, list some of the diseases that are typically an issue, and why they are an issue. Maybe control methods are a bit expensive, so they're not used by most farmers, or maybe they're ineffective, so they don't work quite as well as you would want. The other one here is number 3. So we're looking at water management, limited water access, and the definition is limited access to water lifting and conveyancing tools means that farmers are affected negatively in their capacity to adapt to water deficit. So when we say water management here, we're really talking about irrigation. So if that is what is reflected here, then that's great. But if we're talking about limited water access because of a lack of rainfall or something like that, that would actually be captured in the C minus module. So in the C minus module, you've already put late season water deficit, mid season water deficit, and early season water deficit. So that pretty comprehensively covers any deficit in rainfall. So if that is what we're looking at here in the P minus module, then it might be worthwhile reconsidering, just because we don't want to double count the constraints, because that'll have some implications later on. Moving on to the P module, there were a couple of considerations here, but based on the last sort of correspondence that we had, those were all double checked and you were all happy with those. Moving on to the C minus module, I think we're all good in here. All of the challenges and details match up. The units are good as well. Now in this one, the module CV here, there's still a couple of these are a little bit low, some of the values that you've put in. So the question to ask here, are any of these crops, is there any reason that they would not be impacted? So think of it both in a sense of the climate event being mild and very severe. If in a very severe year, there's no way that maize could be impacted by late season water deficit, then maybe it would be less than 100%. But unless maize is irrigated, or unless any of these crops is irrigated, they will be affected if there is a late season water deficit. Moving down, early season water deficit, that's the same. It's very likely that these will all be 100%. Remember, we're not talking about the differences between crops. So maybe it is that sunflowers are a little bit more resilient to water deficit. But if the water deficit was very severe, it doesn't matter if it doesn't happen so much in your country. Here we're looking at if it's possible that sunflower would be affected in the case where it's very severe. Moving down here, intense rainfall, same deal. Is there any reason that maize would not be affected by intense rainfall? I can't think of any other than the fact that, I can't think of an example here where it wouldn't be affected. Terminal heat stress is another one. All of these crops would be affected by terminal heat stress if it got bad enough. And remember, you're looking at if in a very severe year, these crops would be affected. And for all of them, it's likely that they would be. Extreme temperature days, again, that's looking at heat, so a similar thing. Severe winds, this is a little different here because you might have some crops which aren't affected because they are sheltered by the topography of the region. So it may be worthwhile reassessing these values. CO, we also discussed these ones and you guys were happy with those. CI now. So for the non-event years here, it's very likely that that would be slightly higher than a current average yield of the crop. So what we're asking for here is for maize, for a late season water deficit, so that's the climate event here. If you had an average year, but there was no late season water deficit, how high would the yield be? So would the yield be the same, or would it be a little bit higher? Maybe on average, you do have a little bit of late season water deficit, which means that in a non-event year, you have a completely normal year, but you take away the late season water deficit. Would that go up a little bit? And you can do that moving all the way down. So same deal for groundnut, mid-season, early season, late season, intense rainfall, terminal heat stress. For maize, in a standard year, maybe there is a little bit of terminal heat stress, which means that yields are slightly decreased. If you were to take that constraint away, how high would this go? Would this be a little bit higher? It's possible that it would be. Moving down here then, mild event year, those all look pretty good. Chances are that a mild event year will be slightly lower than a non-event year. And moving on, that's the same, that's a trend that you'll see. So non-event year will likely be the highest, mild event year will be slightly lower, moderate event year a little lower still, all the way to a catastrophic event year, which when you compare it back to the non-event year, will be quite severely decreased. So that's all the changes which just need to be checked over in this file here. And good luck with your workshop.